Good morning and welcome to the October 27th Let's Talk. Today we're going to talk about two things. We'll talk about COVID and then we'll also talk about a little bit more specifically the strategic plan. Um, Let's Talks will continue to have some COVID talk with it, especially as things continue to change. And then we will move on to be more strategic plan and other things happening around campus. So today with COVID, the numbers continue to tick up. We continue to see an increase in Maricopa County in Arizona and across the country. Not what we consider a spike, not a huge concern yet. You know, as schools have now opened, lots of the businesses have now opened, we expected to see an uptick. But again, we're still watching that closely as 6 months ago we saw that uptick and then we saw the spike. So we're going to continue moving in the same direction we've been moving until the numbers tell us to do otherwise. So over the next couple of weeks, the 360 letters that go out every Thursday the format's gonna change on those probably gradually and then really big at once. And again, our goal is to make those easier to understand, easier to read, and then we'll have attachments for those other items so that it isn't a 5 or 6 page document, but the 360 letter itself has the critical information, and then we have the attachments for residents or staff to be able to follow. And those attachments will talk about things such as the dining venues and are there any new rules with the dining venues, what's open, what's not, is it reservation only. We'll be talking about the isolation and what that looks like at any given time. We know we've had lots of changes over the last 30-something weeks, but we want to have a pretty simple format. It's not the 360 letter, but a flyer that goes out every week with the 360 letter that talks about the current barriers, the current restraints, the current amenities that are open and what restrictions there are. So again, look forward to that coming in the very near future. And you know, some of the things that have changed over the last couple of days is on Monday we opened up the outdoor visits. So we have the visits in 1040, we have the visits in your apartment, we have the virtual visits, and now we have outdoor contactless in-person visits. And again, that seems to be going well. It's going a little slow, which is good, but that's a visit without the person coming on campus having to test. They are doing symptom checks, but not doing a COVID-19 test, and that's happening in the cul-de-sac. So again, that's happening. Along with that, we made a change that we talked about last week, which is we're no longer going to have the guard shack out front. That guard shack is going to be in the cul-de-sac, and employees and residents are going to be able to check themselves in with their key fobs. I've heard from a few residents whose key fob didn't work when they tried to check in at the gate today or yesterday. If that happens and your fob's no longer working, call reception. Reception will work with Garth, Lorenz in Plant Ops, and with Al in security to get your key fob turned back on if it didn't get turned on with the masses. So again, that's a big change. And again, what you'll notice with COVID is we have been changing as it becomes safer in the community, and again, safer because of the numbers are at a low enough number, as more therapeutics are put in place to treat COVID, as we have more testing availability. We've been removing some of the other barriers, and we've been asking residents to, again, continue to take personal responsibility, make good decisions, and again, we continue to head down that road of asking residents, as we did with the self-symptom checks, those who want to do that. We will eventually probably talk about residents self-isolating if they feel they've had an exposure or they've gone off campus. So we're going to continue to head down that direction as it's safe for us to do so, and people will have to make choices about what risk they're willing to take. We ask though that, again, when you're on campus in common areas, wear your mask. If you're one of those people leaving the campus, wear your mask and your shield. Do not expose your neighbors to something they're not looking to be exposed to. If you're leaving campus, we expect you to be careful and self-isolate yourself outside of the common areas, not having people over to your apartments during that 3-day isolation period. There's probably more to talk about COVID, and again, look at the 360 for more information. Now I want to talk about the strategic plan. Last week we kind of did a reminder of what are the 5 categories of the strategic plan. And again, that's culture, number 1. How do we retain the great culture we have at Westminster Village, making it a great place to live, making it a great place to work. The second is the campus itself, so the physical layout, the building, the bricks and mortar, the landscaping. The third category is technology. The fourth is programs. So programs really are all the services we offer. Concierge is a program. The restaurants are a program. Housekeeping is a program. And then financial objectives we have as an organization. Today we're going to focus on the campus itself, and next week we're going to talk about technology. So the campus itself, we have a couple of major projects in play right now. So the first one being the healthcare center remodel. We've been talking about that. It feels like forever, but definitely for a year or two. That task force reports to the Strategic Planning Committee, which reports to the Board of Directors. We just had a board meeting last week, and the healthcare center remodel task force gave a report to the Strategic Planning Committee, and their end goal is in January to present an option to the Strategic Planning Committee and to the Board of Directors. So we've started the process with the architects and the contractors, and we got the first bid back, which is well above what we budgeted, and that was a bid to really get everything we could possibly want. And now it's time to kind of relook at that and go, what can we really afford of those things we really want? It's almost like going to buy a house and the real estate agent shows you something well outside of your budget and you go, wow, that's amazing, I want that. You know, we're kind of at that crossroads. Can we afford that? Can we make that happen? Or do we need to kind of go back into within our budget? So the task force is going to look at 4 options, and option 1 being, you know, we want everything that we asked for. So how do we find financing to get everything we wanted? So they're gonna look at that and see if that makes sense to present to the Strategic Planning Committee. They're gonna look at, do we draw out that plan even though it's more than we can afford and only do a small portion or a portion at a time so that over time we get the whole plan. So that's option number 2. Option number 3 is looking at what the architects have drawn up and kind of going, how do we get the most of that right now, even though it might not make the most sense long term, but how do we get the most out of that so day 1 after this renovation on the first phase, you walk in and you go, wow, this is what the rest of the building is, the Wyrick Healthcare Center is going to look like. Option 4 has more to do with the licensing than the actual physical campus, because one of the things we have to do is meet the new assisted living codes with a renovation in order to switch to assisted living. So option 4 looks at keeping the license as a skilled nursing license for a short time, so we don't have to, we get more bang for our buck, more looks and appearance, but not meeting the new code. So they're going to look at those 4 options, and I know that's confusing. We're going to talk about it a bunch before the board has to make a decision. But really looking at those 4 options, that task force will pick the best option, we'll get it priced out, we'll get time frames to go along with that, and then present it to Strategic Planning Committee in January. So big project. We still have lots of work to do on it, but it is moving forward. And again, our goal still is to move to make the Wyrick Healthcare Center an assisted living facility or enhanced assisted living with mostly private rooms, with all rooms having showers and private baths, and really upgrading the living space and the commons areas. And again, we know that's going to take time, but we hope to be able to start some construction or phase 1 of that in 2021. Other things that are happening are kind of littler projects. So as we, and I won't say get to the new normal, but kind of learn to live with COVID. I think that's kind of what we're talking about. COVID's probably here for a while. It won't be the most important thing forever, but it's probably sticking around. So how do we learn to live with COVID? And as we look at the campus itself, again, moving the guard shack from the front driveway to behind the gates, that's one of those things, right? It's making sure the campus looks great. We've taken down some of the heavy plastic we had up and replaced it with plexiglass. In some areas, we'll probably now replace it with real glass. Repairing some of the damage we've done with the sprays of COVID. You probably notice a lot of the furniture is no longer out there. Some of that stuff that was stained from the disinfectant we use. We're in the midst of redoing Donnelly's. It was part of what we wanted to do anyways, but as we pulled all the chairs out of Donnelly's, it was clear we shouldn't put those chairs back. So we're doing some refurbishing in there so that when we're able to open Donnelly's, hopefully sometime in November, it looks and feels good. So we're spending some dollars to make sure Westminster Village looks the way it should when you walk through the hallways. And again, just getting some of those things that weren't a priority during the first couple of months of COVID. We tried to lower our footprint of our employees and our vendors, so there's some touching up and work we just need to do to get us back to our standard look. So that's happening as we speak. The other thing that kind of goes along with that, one of the things we did early on with COVID is we really cut back on our landscaping team. We used those guys to do other work like take temperatures of people and work the front doors and deliver food. And what happened is, we got overgrown in a lot of areas. Mike and his team have done a lot of work to get landscaping back to where it should be. We still have a few more weeks of that, but that's a big project. You may notice over in the cul-de-sac, some of those areas we started taking out the grass and putting in the artificial turf. The artificial turfs today look really good, and there's some areas where we have more nut grass than ryegrass or Bermuda, so we've started that process. We're going to continue that through this year and next year and probably the following year. There'll be some areas on campus where we still have real grass, but some of the areas it just makes sense to go to the artificial turf. So we're going to continue to look at landscaping and really just trying to get us back to where we were prior to COVID. Next week we're going to talk about technology, and with technology, you probably received something in your mailbox today or Friday maybe, talking about that first step. So it's the first step in the new infrastructure. And right now, what we're focusing on is the employee network and bringing that up to where we think it should be in 2020, security-wise, quality-wise. And it's really a rebuilding of the infrastructure. And it's one of about 15 phases we'll be doing over the next 2 years. So we'll talk a lot more about that next week, but just wanted to kind of give you a heads up of the topic. Next week will be infrastructure, and the week after will probably be financial objectives. That's all I have for today. Thank you, and we'll talk next week.